Well, hello, I am Bree Williams and I'm here with a very special guest, Bora Ergor. Now, Bora is a psychology undergraduate at the University of Strasbourg and has been interning with me this year. And I thought, as our final assignment together, I thought it would be great to have Bora talk through some of what we've found together and maybe even some tips for people that are looking to intern with any sort of business or organisation in the future. So, hello, Bora.
Hi, Bree.
Look, I thought I would start with our first piece of work, which is probably pertinent to our conversation tonight or this morning for you, which
Exactly.
is how to be credible online. So, when you're presenting online. So, can you remember what we found about that and a few of the ideas that came out of that study?
Yeah, and actually, this is very ironic when we think about our situation because I always have a hard time doing these kinds of video co conferences, even though we did this research. So, one of the main findings was like to make the eye contact, to make sure you make eye contact while you're speaking, and also since, especially when using Zoom or other kinds of applications, you see all the screens of other people. Minimizing those screens was it also a tip that they gave us because otherwise you always feel like everyone's looking at you, whereas in real life you have the opportunity to look at your paper, look at your notes, you don't actually make that much eye contact with 20 people at the same time, whereas now you feel all the eyes. And also they mentioned your tone and especially taking some breaks when you're speaking. So instead of going at a very high rate of words, if you take some pause, they mentioned breathy pauses. So that would make you seem more confident because it's more natural.
I'm trying to pause right now, Bora.
Okay.
But that is so true. So we were looking at fatigue a bit, weren't we? Because when this was earlier this year in 2021, and everyone was fairly new to video conferencing, and people were getting really, really tired. So yeah, minimizing other people's screens, but also turning off your own self view, so you're not staring at yourself. But I think that question of eye contact is so important because I imagine you're at the moment trying to look down the lens of your what a laptop,
Yeah,
and so you can't actually see me, can you? Unless I gesture really big.
exactly.
You have to flip between them, so you almost have to make a choice. Am I going to look like I am looking at people, or am I actually going to look at people? I've got now, as a result of the work that we did together, I was looking for a solution for that. So I've now got a camera on what's called um, a plexicam. So it's a bit of perspex and it hangs over the screen. And that I've found really, really improved things.
Because I actually have this problem with my parents too. Like, I don't know if I'm supposed to look at them or the camera, and yeah,
Yes. Yes, we're all struggling still.
yeah,
And the other point that you raised from the research was really important, which is when you are in a face-to-face meeting in real life, you're not intensively looking at a person without breaking. So you're looking around the room, you're looking at your notes, and it relaxes everyone. It's not as intense. Whereas online, that's why we're getting so tired.
yeah. The Zoom fatigue, as they coined it so
Yes,
accurately, I guess.
yes, absolutely. Not great for the Zoom brand, but
Yeah.
now after that, so that sort of was our first assignment together, and then we moved into topics around framing. And because I was very curious, because I write for a business audience about exactly what to say. So when they're writing an email or they're in conversation with a client, people are very keen to know exactly what they should say. So, what can you remember about what you discovered about language and framing?
So whenever I think about framing, there's this one research that always pops out to my mind. It's by Elizabeth Loftus, and it talks about the car accident. I mean, they show this car accident, or just a picture of two cars collided, let's say, and they only manipulated the word collided, smashed, crashed, and they wanted people to guess how fast the cars were going. And just the simple change of this word affected their perception. So it just underlines how important actually framing is, like the word choices. And in terms of the our audience, so the business, I found that using I pronouns, first person pronouns, is good because it creates the empathy with the client. But except for when you're giving bad news, which in that case they suggest using the we pronouns because that way, I guess, it kind of reduces the responsibility of the agent, like the customer service agent, so that the client would not get mad at them. But they also represent the company, so they say we. So it's kind of like the middle way in terms of you create the empathy with the client, but also you don't take full responsibility, so they can't actually get mad at you. So the client service is actually better viewed.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and something that is now, thanks to the work that you've done and some further thinking of put to language and framing. Now I have these sorts of answers in a couple of my products. So just do this, and my other online course, Influencing Action, I actually go into the detail of this because pronouns, there's a lot to them, and we underestimate them. So the use of I, so I decided, can get people really defensive because it sounds like it's a very subjective decision. So I've made the choice, I'm standing in judgment. Whereas if we use passive tense, it has been decided or we have decided, it softens it a little. We do have to be careful about using we too much because otherwise people get angry and it's like, you're not telling me who's responsible and you're not telling me who's accountable. So we have to be careful about that. But going back to that study that you described with the language of collided and smashed and I think bumped, talk us through a little bit more detail. So in the study, they swapped out one word, didn't they?
Yeah. So what they did is they presented this picture of the end result of the accident, and then they
Okay.
asked how fast the cars were going when they hit, bumped, collided, and smashed. And the perceptions of the speed of the car increased with each word, and it was a drastic
Yeah.
improvement in the
No,
speed.
well, people
Yeah,
thought it was a much the car was speeding much faster, didn't they? If it was a
exactly.
word like what collided, not collided, smashed, for instance.
Smashed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Whereas bumped was fairly low. And this has
yeah,
significant implications for instance, witness testimony or
exactly.
when we're describing events to customers or having them described by a customer, because the language can inflame expectations or perception of an
Yeah,
event.
and it's kind of scary how considerably easy it is to create or induce false memories into people, and that's actually what they were underlining with the study. So even if I guess what you did was wrong, if you frame it in a good way, it might change the perceptions in the
Yes,
past.
if you're the one that has bumped the car rather than
Yeah.
smashed the car, it's going to be much better for you. And so we're on that sort of theme of language, and that sort of moved us to another assignment that we worked on, which was looking at prevention and promotion focus. So talk to us a little bit about what those terms mean and what the research is telling us.
Okay, so I guess to summarize it, I would say prevention-focused people are looking at things in a more utilitarian way, like what can they do with it, like actually, and most importantly, what they will lose if they don't do it. So they're more, I wouldn't say scared, but they're like more risk averse, whereas promotion-based people, promotion motivated people are looking at hedonistic way, they say. So what they will gain from it instead of what they will lose. And there was a very interesting ad campaign for marriage counseling, and they actually framed it in two different ways. So it was either framed in terms of making the communication better, so that was promotion focused, or they said reducing divorce rates, so that was prevention focused. I guess that's a good example.
It's a terrific example, and again, it illustrates how we have to sweat the small detail, don't we, in how we
Yeah,
communicate, because it can influence whether people um, go with us or whether they back away from us. So,
yeah.
does the research tell us whether people are either are either born promotion focused or prevention focused? What can you tell us?
So we it does kind of seem to have a trait-like feature to it. So some people have natural, or rather innate, prevention or promotion focus of their own, but thankfully, or looking at how you would look at it, you can induce them. So this again leads us back to priming or framing. So actually, if you frame the message that you want to give in a certain way, you can actually induce the focus that you would like to, induce. And the research actually shows that promotion-based people or promotion focus is more susceptible to accepting the messages. I mean, the effects are bigger if you already have a promotion focus and if you frame it in a promotion focused way instead of changing the minds of prevention based people. So,
Yeah, so
yeah,
it seemed to be if you were in any doubt and you had to choose
yeah,
one or the other, you would tend to do a promotion
a
focus, which
promotion.
is maximizing or celebrating what people have to gain from
Yeah,
something as opposed to avoiding a loss. So I think
exactly.
that was really interesting and beautifully articulated, Bora. So then that really set me into motion where I was like, oh, that because this is all regulatory fit theory, regulatory focus. That then set me to, well, what does personality mean and how can we cross match it with framing messages? And so we sort of dove a little bit deeper in that. And again, that sort of work has now found its way into products and services that I offer my clients. Thank you, Bora. So, do you have any further thoughts on how personality type changes how we communicate?
So, as with the regulatory focus theory and regulatory fit, so that's when people get this, when there's a match between their focus and how the message is presented. So this actually extends to traits as well. If the messages are fitting to our personality traits, we have a higher tendency to follow the message or like at least accept the message. And so I guess the biggest problem with this is it seems very intuitive. I mean, of course, if there's a match, it's going to be better, but the hard part is how. How are we going to know what people are, like what are their traits? So obviously, psychology uses psychometric tests, but it would be very hard to do this with actual business clients and like, I mean, you can't just, okay, fill out this form, 10 pages long. So instead of that, there was actually a very, very interesting topic, a research that used digital psychometrics. So they used Facebook likes and the clicks, and they found that this was a very reliable predictor of their traits, even more so than their close friends of the people that actually were being, assessed. So obviously, this raises the questions in terms of ethics, like is it ethical? But I guess we all give our consent when we're using Facebook. So
Yeah, and that did lead us into an investigation on sludge or dark patterns as well. Because I
yeah,
think, yes, it's interesting that a lot of these algorithmic based services they're capturing and or interpreting patterns about our behavior, which mean we might not even realize at a conscious level because we're doing it in a subconscious way. And but on the accumulation of all our behavior means that we can be profiled. So there is that side, certainly, with a lot of these digital services. I will say that as part of my influencing action course, I won't talk too much more about my products, but I've now got ways that people can, because I want people in business, for instance, to be able to, within moments of talking to someone, kind of work out what sort of personality type am I dealing with. And so I've got materials which will help people do that, because you sort of have to make these decisions on the fly. And you're right, you can't get people to fill out a 10-page psychological profile to do it. So, dark patterns and sludge. Do you have any thoughts on that? I know you're very passionate about ethics and how we
Yeah.
use the behavioral sciences.
So sludges is, well, it's basically the opposite of nudges. So nudges are when we use behavioral science insights, or like, actually the way I use it, I'm going to try to explain this without using any jargons. So I think we all have biases. I mean, I guess that's still a jargon, but so we have these shortcomings because we're lazy, as you as you frame it. We're lazy, we're overwhelmed. So we have our tendencies to find easier ways to do things or do the least action to get to things. And so the decision makers, or actually at least the people who are framing the decisions or people who are presenting us the options, they have the option to use these in our benefit, which could be considered a nudge because then they're not actually doing something in terms of incentives, but they're just nudging us towards that decision, which is beneficial for us. And I guess the sludges is the exact opposite of this, where they use these shortcomings, the behavioral shortcomings, in their benefit and not in our benefits. So that would be when you're trying to unsubscribe from an email newsletter, they write it in such a small font that you can't see in the bottom of the page, and you click it and you have to go through another form. They ask you why you want to quit. Like, I already want to quit. I don't want to go through this application. So unfortunately, this was linked to higher people. I mean, companies gained from this in terms of subscriptions because we subscribe to things for monthly free trials and then we forget. And so they do gain money from this, but uh, in terms of trust for the company, this is not really the best way to go because when you're trying, if you struggle when you're trying to unsubscribe or when you're trying to quit your affiliation with the company, if they put more difficulties in front of your way, then you start losing even more confidence and you start liking the brand even more. So I guess it's kind of counterintuitive in the brand's way.
Yeah,
So
I think you can win in the short term by doing sludge tactics, or effectively, yeah, making it very difficult for your customer or the client to do what they really want to do. Sort of, and you trap them in an architecture that they don't want to be trapped in. You can win in the short term doing that, but you really lose a lot of brand value, brand trust. And now, in the days of so much transparent social media, people can just go online and absolutely savage you. So you're
exactly.
it's not a good business strategy to make life difficult for customers at all. You're just going to get angry people everywhere. That was really the lay of the land in terms of the assignments. If you reflect on those, Bora, can you see a through line of all of the different areas that you pulled together research around?
So when we were doing this, since it was on a monthly based, at least the topics changed on a monthly base or more or less regularly. So while doing it, I was just researching and I didn't actually have the time, or just I didn't really think how they were necessarily related. But looking back at it, we were actually talking about this just before. I found it rather easy to find the through line, as you put it, because first we looked at how can the companies better communicate within themselves. So in terms of meetings, so that was more in within the company. And then we extended this, okay, so how could they better communicate with their clients? And that would be how they would frame the messages, frame the advertisements towards their clients. So that was what to say and also how to say it. And then we dove deeper into, okay, so we know how they could communicate, but what can they say? So we looked at framing, and then that led us into a rabbit hole of uh, regulatory focus, like personality traits. And of course, when you say personality traits, I mean, at least I always immediately think about, okay, so how can they know? So that led us to digital psychometrics and new ways to infer the traits, which inevitably led us to the dark sides of using this. So sludges was the next topic, and yeah,
Yeah, and certainly as you've beautifully articulated that journey, I think it always everything leads for me back to the small things that really make behavior happen and how because it's so impactful, we can impact ourselves and others through these techniques. There's a significant responsibility then that comes with how we use this knowledge and what we do with it. And I think that's really where the ethics um, really comes home for me around it. So,
exactly.
yes, if you are in this field or you're interested in this field, you also really have to have a moral compass about how you use it and who you're serving with the techniques. And where to next for you, Bora? We've concluded our work together, and you've mentioned that you're more interested in some policy work and that sort of things. But where to next for you?
Okay, I'm definitely interested in research, and this actually was a great starting point for me because I really wanted. So research was always something that I was interested in, but my biggest concern in research was how can I do research that could be applicable into real life situations, and this was, I guess, a very practical way of doing it because we were doing something, I was doing research, we were doing research, and then it was directly applied to the companies. So at least present it to them so that they could apply it or not. And so now I'm still looking out for other research opportunities and actually found some. And those are less in the behavioral science domains, but still, my goal is to find a topic that could be influenced, regardless of what the topic is, with the insights of behavioral sciences, because in the end, we're all humans and we're all influenceable, and it all goes through the behaviors and the small tweaks that we can do to make things better. And as you said, you have to have a moral compass when doing all of this, and obviously you could use it to manipulate people, but you could also do it for the good of people. And I think change starts from these small steps that we can take, and policymakers and the choice architects have a huge role in this. And whether we like it or not, we're going to be influenced by by it. So might as well put some effort into it. Might as well uh, do it in a good way.
That is beautiful, Bora. Um, I'm tempted to finish on that, but I do want to just have any final tips that you might want to share with other interns about how to approach finding a position or targeting or yeah, asking someone to be an intern, but also how to put yourself in the work.
So I don't want to sound pretentious, but I think the most important thing is just to put yourself out there and just try because I mean, while I was composing my letter, my email, not letter, my email to you, of course, I was hoping that it would happen, but at the same time, I didn't know. I just wanted to try because what can I lose by trying it? At least I would have tried it. So, and obviously, you don't actually have a CV necessarily before starting your first internship because how could you? But there has to be a starting point, and I think that comes from how you present yourself and have some confidence in yourself, but also be humble because you can't be like, oh, I know all of this and I'm on already. Well, first of all, I was an undergrad, so I didn't actually know that much. So uh, just be honest and know what you're looking for. I guess that's important, and just put yourself out there and just try.
That was fabulous, Bora. I want to thank you personally for all the work that you've done with me. You've been an absolute joy. You are a huge talent, and anyone who works with you is going to um, experience the best of what humanity has to offer. You're very humble and super, super smart, and an excellent marathon runner. So, thank you, Bora. I'm going to conclude this interview just with my thanks and best wishes for the future. And I hope that we'll always keep in touch.
Thank you so much. It means truly, truly a lot.